One of the things that I have realized in serving God for more than 30 some years and following Christ for, wow, a long time. I'm not going to say how long, but a long time. One of the things that I have found out, there is a lot of injustices in this world. Did you know that? There's a lot of things that are not fair. And if you really look at life and you look at our world that we live in, there's lots of things that say, wait a minute, God, I don't get this. This doesn't make sense to me. 1 plus 1 should equal 2, but it's not equaling 2. What's going on, right? And there are many times in our life that we come to these points where we even have the question, why God? I don't know if you've ever said that, but I've said that plenty of times in my life of, circumstances or trauma or, tragedies or whatever, you can put whatever in that spot. But there's moments in our life where we say, why God? And we're not sure how to look at the situation because it doesn't seem fair. And I don't know about you, but in my lifetime, there's been many of those moments where, I'm talking with my wife or I'm just talking to God or talking to one of my friends and I'm scratching my head and say, wait a minute, we did all the right things. We said all the right prayers. We've walked through all the right steps biblically, and yet, where's the result? You ever been there? I've been there. And sometimes that question, why God, is sometimes a little bit frightening. It's like, how could we ask God those questions? I thought we're supposed to trust Him with all of our heart. And is it okay for us to ask these kind of questions? And the answer is yes. The answer is yes. I mean, if you look at the book of Psalms, you see David and write so many times his complaint to God. Did you realize that? There's over 40 chapters in the book of Psalms alone that is David complaining, grumbling to God and saying, hey, God, I don't get you. I don't understand you. What's going on? And by the way, David didn't get struck dead by lightning for doing this, right? I mean, actually, this was okay with God. God is big enough to handle your question. And I grew up in a very religious home, and one of the things I realized is that my church, I had developed a lot of different mindsets of what we should say to God and what we shouldn't. And I thought, boy, I should never question God or ask these kind of questions because it's so, disrespectful to God and I'm not honoring who God is. And the point is this: God is big enough to answer our question. He's big enough to handle any questions that we might throw at Him. Amen. So I want to start tonight just by this thought. Have you ever thought, why do the ungodly prosper? You ever had that thought? I mean, you look at your neighbors sometimes, or some guy pulls up beside you in this, awesome car, and you're like, wait a minute, God. Obviously, this guy, on his bumper sticker, you can tell by his bumper sticker that he doesn't love God. He loves something else, right? And you realize, whoa, what's going on? I mean, sometimes we look at people around us, and we look at the lives of people, and we would classify them in the area not of the godly but the ungodly, and we say, but look at their lives, man. They ride in style. They have the nicest cars. They have the nicest houses. It seems like everything is going so wonderful for them, and yet we try to follow God, and it seems like we struggle with so many things. And so I'm going to just ask a couple more questions. I do the right thing, and I suffer. It's not fair. I should be awarded for good things or prosper. If I do the right things and live righteously, it seems like the closer I walk with God, the harder it becomes. I don't know if you ever had these kind of thoughts, but it's like sometimes you look at people out there that care less about God, care less about following Him, care less about going to church or doing the right thing. They just do whatever feels right for them, and it seems like everything they do is prospering. Everything they do is going well for them. Many times they're healthy, and even though they're living this crazy lifestyle of whatever it is, of exaggerated addictions and habits, but yet they seem like they have a healthy body. And it's like, I don't get this. But the moment you say, I'm going to follow Jesus, it's like all hell breaks loose against you. And it's like, the closer I want to walk with God, it seems like I get harder. It gets harder. And today, I want us to go through this chapter, and it's found in the book of Psalms, chapter 73. We're just going to read through it, and as we go, I'm going to make a few comments. The guy that's writing this is actually one of David's chief musicians called Asaph. And Asaph was this, he had, there were these like 3 chief musicians that David had that helped in the worship of the temple, and this was one of his guys. And this guy, he's writing, and he's pouring out his heart in this psalm, but boy, as we hear his heart, there are things here that really are going to connect with us. And I feel like there is, I don't know why God wanted me to preach this particular message. I've never preached this before in my life. And so I realize that, boy, there's something to this tonight that somebody needs to hear, or somebody's going to watch this online and they're going to be touched by God. Because as I was preparing for this, it really touched me because it checks your heart. And it's good for us to have a heart checkup. Did you know that? It's good along this journey that as we go along with God, that things don't get stuck in our heart that shouldn't be there. And so here is this guy, Asaph, and he's the author of Psalm 73, and he's pouring out his heart, and we're going to hear some of the things he says because it's some of the things that we might say sometimes. The first verse we're going to come to is Psalm 73, verse 1 and 2. Truly God is good to Israel, to those whose hearts are pure. But as for me, I almost lost my footing. My feet were slipping and I was almost gone. Now he starts this off by listening. He said, listen, I'm just going to be honest. What I'm about to tell you almost tripped me up. What I'm about to tell you is it was this close, is what he's really saying. It was this close that I myself was about to fall. I was about to slip and trip because of the things that I'm about to express. So when I read these first couple of verses, I'm like, whoa, what's going on with this guy? That he starts off his statement by the confession that this is so powerful, it almost caused me to slip, and I'm one of the chief musicians in the temple. And I look at that and I go, whoa, if this spiritual leader in the temple could get tripped up by the things he's about to say, I better take note. Because if it could trip him up, guess what? It can trip me up. It can get into my heart. It can infect me like an infection, and it could ruin my healthy heart towards God. Now let's look at what was tripping him up. Verse 3. For I envied the proud when I saw them prosper despite their wickedness. That's his first statement. So he obviously was looking around him and he was seeing people that could care less about God, and yet they were prospering. Now these were not just any people out there doing whatever. He classifies them as wicked people. These were people that really, really, really did not want anything to do with God. They could actually be antagonistic against God, maybe even don't believe in God, and they just live in their own life, doing whatever they want to do. And here is Asaph, serving God in the temple, full time, by the way. This was one of the paid staff during the time of the temple. He was one of the main worship leaders, and he was serving God with all of his heart. But yet he saw these people out there that are not serving God but seem to be prospering more than him. You see the picture here, what's going on. There is something in the heart of Asaph that's not good. And this is where the heart check comes for all of us tonight. And I believe that as we go forward in our walk with God, this will be something that we all need to examine ourselves sometimes along the way. When you've ever said this, I deserve blessing because, you're in trouble. I deserve blessing because, well, I read my Bible every day this week. I deserve blessing because. Or, I have lived this way all of my life. I deserve to have this because. I have not done X thing, so I deserve blessing because I have not done those things. I have done this, and they have not. How is it fair, God, that they seem to prosper more than me? Now, I'm going to define what prosper here is in this particular place, because when we hear the word prosper, we immediately think about money. But prosper for the Hebrew is this word here is the word shalom. It's the word shalom, which means it's bigger than just money. This is wholeness, completeness, fruitfulness. This is a place that is more than just financial gain or material possessions. Talks about your health. It talks about your emotions. It talks about completeness in who you are. So when they use the term prosper, he sees the wicked prosper. He's not just talking about, well, they have more money than me. That's not what he's talking about. Prosperity for God is defined very differently. We're going to get into some thoughts about prosperity in just a moment. But this attitude that was in Asaph was coming out because he saw this. He says, wait a minute, God, I'm serving you full time. I'm walking with you. I'm doing all the right things, but it doesn't seem fair because those guys out there seem to be prospering more than me. Something's up, God. What's wrong with this? And there's a similar story that Jesus tells in Luke. He says, listen, there was this Pharisee and this, let's see here. The Pharisee and a tax collector, they go to the temple together. Remember that story? And the Pharisee goes, listen, I fast twice a week. I give a tenth of all that I get. I thank you, God, that I'm not like these other people, these evildoers, these robbers, these adulterers. I'm so glad I'm not like them. Remember that story? And then the tax collector says, he beats his chest and says, listen, oh God, save me, have mercy on me because I'm a sinner. And God says that guy goes home righteous more than the Pharisee goes home righteous. And I look at that and I go, wow, there's an attitude here of self-righteousness. I deserve to be blessed because and we can fill in the blank. Well, I fast twice a week, or I go to church on Sundays, and I sacrifice, and I give a tenth of my income to God, and I do all the right things. I deserve to be blessed because. Do you know we deserve to be blessed because of one person, that's Jesus Christ. What he has done for us is the way that blessing comes into our life. Anything that I do that I think I deserve, that's called self-righteousness. And God really, really doesn't like self-righteousness. So anyway, first of all, he says, listen, I don't get this. I don't understand what's going on. The prosperity of the wicked, something seems to be out of balance here. I mean, these guys are careless about you, God. We're serving you full time, but they seem to prosper more than us. But now let's go on to the next thing, verse 4 through 9. They seem to live such painless lives. Their bodies are so healthy and strong. They don't have troubles like other people. They're not plagued with problems like everyone else. They wear pride like a jeweled necklace and clothe themselves with cruelty. These fat cats, notice this is not King James translation, by the way. These fat cats have everything their hearts could ever wish for. They scoff and speak only evil. In their pride, they seek to crush others. They boast against the very heavens, and their words strut throughout the earth. Notice that Asaph is making an observation. He says, listen, their bodies are healthy. Isn't it interesting that our health is connected to this concept of prosperity? Not just physical things, but our health. Our health is a big deal. You can have all the money in the world, but if you're not healthy, you can't enjoy it. In other words, that people have millions and millions and millions of dollars. They paid for the best doctors, and they still die. The reality is, your health is a valuable asset. It is one of the greatest treasures that you have is called your health. So when we are healthy, physically healthy, there is a prosperity that we are walking in because we're healthy. There's a lot of people that are not healthy. You understand? This is part of God's prosperity in your life when you can say, I'm healthy. I can go to work. I can get up. I can do things. I can take care of my family. I can take care of my wife and children. That is a blessing. You understand? To be able to breathe and to be able to move and to be able to go do things and work with your hands, that is a blessing from God. That is part of God's prosperity over your life. But here was something that Asaph I don't know if Asaph was, feeling sick that day or whatever, but he was making an observation. Listen, God, these guys don't even love you, but yet they seem healthier than us. That's not right, God. Wait a minute. Time out. What's going on here? And These rich people, they can have the best doctors. They get sick, they get a sniffle, they go to the best doctor, and they get injections, and they get, well in a few days. It takes me a week to do this, God. It's not fair, right? And there's this attitude that is being revealed in Asaph. Notice what else it says here, verse 10. And so the people are dismayed and confused, drinking all their own words. And then I put here what the Message Bible says, the same thing. They're full of hot air, loud mouths, disturbing the peace. People actually listen to them. Can you believe it? Like thirsty puppies, they lap up their words. What does God know, they ask? Does the Most High even know what's happening? Look at these wicked people enjoying a life of ease while their riches multiply. Really what he's saying here is that the wicked have this influence, but yet they're wicked and they have an influence. Have you seen the stuff that goes on in our world? And if you watch the news, you see some of the Hollywood stars or star athletes that really don't live a godly lifestyle. They have all the money in the world. They're healthy. And you look at the platforms that they have of influence, and they say one thing, and man, it's a fad, and it's a viral on the internet, and it just goes crazy because of the one thing they said, or the hat that they wore, or the shoes, the kind of shoes that they bought. And suddenly everyone's buying all of those things. You realize, whoa, these people have influence. They are people of influence that touch the world, sometimes the entire world, not just the United States. You look at these people and you go, whoa, how is that possible, God? That then you have the church or Christians sometimes that seemingly have no impact or no influence. And you see some of these people out here, but God, they don't even serve you. They're not even following you. But look at the impact that they have around the world. You see, Asaph was observing a couple things. Number one, the prosperity of the wicked. Number two, he was seeing that, hey, the health of the wicked. But number three, the influence of the wicked. He was saying, listen, God, these three things, these are things that are powerful. They're part of prosperity, overall prosperity. But yet they seem to have more than us. Why is that possible? And I really believe that we come to this point. We can come to this point in our life as we look at things in our own life where we have needs in those three areas. When we have financial need, when we have physical needs, when we're not having impact in our world, when our life seems insignificant. And it's like, wait a minute, God, this is not fair. I mean, I gave my tithe on Sunday, and I can't pay my bill on Friday. God, what's going on? I thought that this is the right way. I thought this is what we're supposed to do. God, you told me to pray for my healing, and healing is not coming the way I thought it was going to come. You understand? And I thought I'm a man or a woman of significance, and then I'm supposed to impact my world, but I feel like I'm just a lone star in a lone ranger at my work, and I feel like I'm not having any impact in my work. Where's my influence, God? You understand? These are things that can creep into our heart that begin to eat at us and can cause us to come to a big question. And this is what happened to Asaph. Let's look at the big questions. Verse 13 and 14. Now Asaph's asking himself, did I keep my heart pure for nothing? Did I keep myself innocent for no reason? I get nothing but trouble all day long. Every morning brings me pain. Oof. Do you hear the heart here of Asaph? Wait a minute, God. I'm trying to do the right thing here, and it seems like I'm still getting burnt. I'm trying to be honest and a man of integrity at my work, and it seems like people turn the tables on me. I feel like I'm trying to be a man of God and be a husband and be the right person, and it just seems like things don't go my way. And it's like, wait a minute, what's going on here? You told me to start this business or to start this ministry. You told me to go down this road and begin to follow this. And I felt like I was hearing you and I was doing the right thing. Am I done this in vain, God? You see the heart that's in Asaph. Something struggling inside him. He's just being honest before God. But I tell you, these things can creep into our hearts. These are things that are real. They're real feelings that can come into all of our hearts. I've been Asaph before. All right? I had his hat on before, and I've said those things, or at least felt those things, and I have been that way. It's like, God, wait a minute. I thought this was the right way. Have we done this for nothing? Have I done this for nothing? Have I kept myself in these ways for nothing? It doesn't seem fair, God. What's going on? The problem is, when we come into that place, really what we're saying, we're accusing God of something. That's where we're coming to, really. I mean, if we're very honest, it's like, wait a minute, God, you said that if I do this, that this is going to happen. But it doesn't seem like that's happening. So what's going on, God? You understand? It's like, God, sit down in the chair, and I'm going to tell you what's what. And wait a minute, we're not God's judge. That's not how it works. But sometimes I feel like I can put that position where, wait a minute, God, it's not fair what's going on in my life. It's not fair what's going on in the world. This is not right, God. It's unjust. There's injustice here, and it's not fair, God. The problem is how I answer that question has an effect. We see it here in verse 15. If I had really spoken this way to others, I would have been a traitor to your people. You see, how we answer that question internally has an impact on those around us. How I answer those questions with God, how I come to the conclusion that, has this just been a waste of time? Let's just forget it. Let's go move on with something else. Following God, man, that's too hard. Doing the right thing, that's not easy. That's going against the stream. It's easier just to go with the stream, do what everybody else is doing. Why trouble yourself? Why keep putting myself in the face of the line of danger? Why do that to yourself? Why keep swimming upstream when everybody's, flowing downstream? Why do that? You understand? It's like, why keep pushing against the flow of everything else? It doesn't seem like it's having effect. It doesn't seem like things are turning around for me. These are real things that we can feel. These are real things that we go through. These are real things that come to our minds. But boy, I tell you, if we don't deal with that question starts getting into us. We start thinking that way, and pretty soon we're going to start talking that way. And our speech, our words are going to affect people. And think about the man that's saying this. If Asaph begins to say this in the temple, the amount of people that are going to be influenced by these words it's exaggerated. It's hundreds, thousands of people that Asaph had authority over, or influence over. And if Asaph didn't come to the right conclusion, his wrong conclusion has impact. This happens in our home as a father, as a husband, as a wife. If I don't come to the right conclusions, it's going to have an impact on my spouse, impact on my children, but it's going to be an impact, either way, good or bad, how I walk through this moment. And that's what Asaph was struggling with. Now let's look at where he arrives to, and I believe this will really help us tonight as well. Verse 17. Then I went into your sanctuary, O God, and I finally understood the destiny of the wicked. Let's stop there. Where did Asaph go? He went into the sanctuary of God. What was he doing? He was getting back into the presence of God, focusing worship on God. And that's something that's so powerful when we begin to worship God. There is something that happens when you begin to turn your eyes off of the wicked, off of your circumstance, off of your situation, and you begin to go back and focus on God. There's something that begins to happen internally. There's something that begins to happen with your perspective, with your focus. And it's what happens, you begin to turn your eyes from all the stuff around you, and you begin to focus back on God, and perspective comes back to your heart and to your eyes. What did Asaph do? It says Asaph went into the temple. He went into the sanctuary. He went back into that place of being with God. And when he was with God, there was something that began to happen internally in Asaph that affected his eyes. He began to realize, wait a minute, this is the wrong thinking. This is the wrong thinking. I'm cooperating with the wrong kingdom here. I got to get back to the right kingdom, thinking the right thoughts. And when he began to worship God. Now you say, well, what does worship God look like? Is it sitting in rows and lifting our hands? That could be part of it. But I hope Sundays is not the only moment you worship God. Worshiping God is a daily activity that you can do at all times. You say, well, I'm not a great singer. Well, neither am I, but God loves my voice, just like he loves your voice. What does worship do? Well, we turn on 101.7, the way, and we listen to worship music. Well, that could be part of it. But worship is something of adoration, gratefulness, thankfulness that comes from my heart, expressed through my mouth. It could come through words, through a song, through humming, through whistle. I don't care how you do it, but begin to express your heart to God. And in that place, God begins to adjust our eyes. He begins to refocus us on what's really going on here. Because Asaph realizes that something had happened in his heart. It says, then I realized, verse 21. Are we still here? Let's go down to verse 21. Then I realized that my heart was bitter, and I was all torn up inside. I was so foolish and ignorant. I must have seemed like a senseless animal to you. He's talking to God now. Yet, verse 23, look at this. Yet I still belong to you. You hold my right hand. You guide me with your counsel, leading me to the glorious destiny. Whom have I in heaven but you? I desire you more than anything on the earth. My health may fail, my spirit may grow weak, but God remains the strength of my heart. He is mine forever. Those who desert him will perish, for you destroy those who abandon you. But as for me, how good it is to be near God. I have made the sovereign Lord my shelter, and I will tell everyone about the wonderful things you do. Notice what he's saying here. Something is happening to Asaph in worship. Something is happening when he begins to take his eyes off of all the injustices and all the things that he realizes, wow, this doesn't seem fair. And he puts his eyes on God. And what does God do? He readjusts. He readjusts his eyesight. He readjusts his perspective, his attitude. But that happened in the presence of God. And the problem that happens many times when we get this attitude or these thoughts in our mind, sometimes what happens is we begin to get away from God. It's like we don't want to worship right now. It's like I'm upset right now. I don't get it right now. I'm angry right now, and it's like that's the farthest thing sometimes from our mind. Oh, I want to go worship God right now. It's like, no, I don't want to worship God right now. I'm upset right now. I'm angry. I'm frustrated. I'm disappointed. I mean, we all go through those feelings. And it's like, I don't even want to pray. I don't even want to talk to God right now. You know what I'm saying? And it's like, there's these moments where in that position, we actually begin to stray away. And finally, we realize, wait a minute, time out. What is going on here? And the moment we get back in that position, something begins to happen to our heart, to our eyes, our perception changes. This is where God wants to bring us. I believe that this is a time where in the midst of everything that happens around us, the things that we look at our lives, maybe even our own needs in our own home. We can look at the needs in our own body. We can look at the needs that we're going through, the things that we say, hey, we wanted to be a person of impact. We feel like we're insignificant. Whatever it might be, the reality is this, is that God has given us a way to adjust. And he's saying, listen, in my presence, you're going to get readjusted. You're going to realize that there is temporal and there is eternal. And in that place, we begin to realize, what am I living for? Temporal or eternal. Now, I really believe that Jesus helps define this point of prosperity. Because sometimes we really struggle with this, and there's lots of churches, lots of preachers out there that preach about prosperity, and there's lots of extremes. I understand that. There's lots of extremes out there in this particular area. But one thing that I really believe is that Jesus gave us lots of amazing things about this prosperity, that we look at the wicked and sometimes we think, well, I don't have $1 million like that guy, so God, what's up? You understand? So I'm not prosperous and he is. And so we measure it by numbers or by stuff. We measure it by lots of things that the world says, this is what prosperity is, this is what success is, this is what it really is. But the reality is, God is the one that defines it, not the world. And I got to remind myself that because we are all susceptible to things called the lust of the eyes, the desire of the flesh, the pride of life. All of those things we are susceptible to as we see somebody having great success or somebody having more than me. There's this feeling inside that I go, wait a minute, what's going on? That's not right. And it's not fair, God. You know what I'm saying? We become like the 3-year-old. It's not fair, Daddy, right? And the reality is we are more blessed and prosperous than we think. But we just don't have the right definition. So let me just tell you this last story. Jesus one day was by the sea, and he begins to, there's a big crowd gathers around him, and he realizes, listen, I need to get in a boat. Because there's so many people pressing up here. I'm going to get in a boat. I'm going to get out a little ways from the shore, and that way I can preach to them. So he gets in the boat with Simon. And as he's preaching to this big crowd, he says something to Simon that's very awkward. It's very weird. He says to Simon, go to the deep and let down your nets. And Simon, of course, responds and listen, we've been doing this all night, and we haven't caught anything. So in other words, Jesus, I know you're really good at preaching and teaching and healing people, but let us do the fishing part. I mean, you're not a fisherman. You grew up to be, you were a carpenter. You're not a fisherman. This is our expertise. Listen, we've been doing this all night. We know what we're doing, but we didn't catch anything. But Jesus said, listen, go into the deep, throw out your nets. And this was a thing that began to happen with Simon. Simon says, okay, we're going to do it. Do you know that obedience brings prosperity to your life? There's no other way that prosperity comes. It comes through Jesus Christ, yes, but we cooperate with this process through a thing called obedience. And obedience brings prosperity into your life. Obedience to what? Well, in this case, Peter was being obedient to the word of Jesus. Jesus said, listen, Peter, go into the deep, throw out your nets, and you're going to see something new. So Peter, against his better judgment, against his expertise, his professional career, goes and does that, throws down the nets, and you know the story. They start pulling in the nets, it's too full. There's so many fish in the net that they have to call the other partners to come and bring more ships to bring in the haul of this vast amount of fish. What do we learn from this? The reality is, through obedience, prosperity comes into our life. I'm not just talking about finance. I'm talking about every area of our life. Obedience, when we act upon what God has said, things begin to happen. There are things that begin to fall into place. There are things that begin to take place in our life. Now, you might say, well, does that mean that Peter became a multimillionaire? It doesn't necessarily mean that. But Peter prospered that day, and not only that prosperity was for him, it actually prospered others that he was connected with. So we see here God's economy, or God's way of thinking about prosperity in our lives. We realize that we are healthy, not just so I can be Mr. Joe healthy and have a nice body, but that I am healthy to carry out the will of God and impact people. Ever capture that? I am so grateful to be healthy today because I can go on Wednesday and fly to another country and preach and make an impact in a nation. But if I wasn't healthy, I couldn't do that. You understand? So I'm healthy. God gives health, or the prosperity of health, for a reason, not just to be Joe Cool. That's not the reason. The reason is I'm healthy for a purpose. The reason God blesses us with finance is not so that we can just hoard up more and more and more. It is so that we can be like our Father, who is super, super generous, and we can become generous in our giving. Understand? And when he tells me to take a step of faith, be obedient, it will cause an impact in someone's life. Now you might say, well, I'm not impacting 1,000 people. That's okay. God may have you impact one person. But it's kind of like Ananias in the Bible, in the book of Acts. It says this was a simple disciple named Ananias. Ananias has a dream. In the dream, he sees this man named Saul. Saul has blindness. Saul is an enemy of the church. But in the dream, God says to Ananias, Ananias, this man is called and he's going to do this, this, and this. Go to his house. Go to this place. And we see Ananias go and prophesy over this man named Saul. What an act of faith. But you know, you never hear of Ananias again. Isn't that interesting? But Ananias was faithful to that one moment in his life. And he impacted a man named Saul who became Paul, who today we are impacted by Paul's life. You get it? You see, God prospers us through obedience, and our obedience opens doors that are incredible, but it's not measured in the same definition or measurement that this world measures with. And that's where Asaph had to come to and realize, listen, I gotta measure things the way God measures stuff. I gotta begin to think different and understand that his blessing in my life is for a purpose that has eternal investment. And today I believe that in our lives, there might be needs in our home. There might be needs in our body where we're the one needing healing tonight, or we're the one that needs finance, or we're the one that needs, to feel like we're being more of an impact in our world. I don't know what your needs are, but the reality is we can't become like Asaph in the conclusion and say, listen, I guess it was in vain that I followed this. I guess it was in vain that I was giving, I was sowing, and the more I sow, the poorer I got. Wait a minute, God, what's going on? You understand? It's like the moment we say yes to God, there's an enemy that says no to us. And there is this onslaught of resistance that comes against the will of God. It happened to Jesus. You don't think it's going to happen to us? Of course it is. Happen to the one we're following, it's going to happen to us. The moment we say yes to Jesus, I'm going to do it your way. I'm following you. I'm going to obey what you put in my heart to do. There is a real enemy that comes and says, no, you're not. I'm going to do whatever it takes to stop you, to make you disappointed, to frustrate you. But that's where we turn our eyes to God. And he begins to say, listen, Greg, you can do this. Listen, brother and sister, you can do this. You can go forward. You don't have to stop. You don't have to become like Asaph, where it says, my heart had become bitter. He was acknowledging, listen, God, this stuff's already started to seep into my heart. I didn't even realize it. But I don't want it there anymore. So today I want to encourage all of us, that maybe there are things in our heart where we've been saying, questioning God, why? God, how come? It doesn't seem fair. I'm doing all the right things, but boy, it doesn't seem like things are changing very quickly here. I don't get it, God. Let's be like Asaph. Go into the sanctuary again and say, God, you are God. Who do I have in heaven but you? I love that when Asaph is saying that. Listen, if I look around, I realize my only help is God. What am I doing here? What am I thinking? This is stinking thinking, as they say. I got to put my brain back on God. I got to focus my eyes back on him, because this stuff, boy, it can mess me up. It can mess my heart up. I don't want to be that way.